Hello, everyone who is joining us. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to let people filter in from the waiting room and come on in here. And while I wait for everybody to join us, I'm going to tell you a couple of things. First, who I am. My name is Janelle Codiani, and I am the Executive Director of ātac, Downtown Arts and Music, formerly known as Amazing Things Arts Center. And we are located in downtown Framingham in an old historic firehouse. But right now, obviously, we're located wherever you are. I'm in Providence, we're all over the place. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining us in this format that is officially over a year old for this sort of programming. ātac is a visual and performing arts center, and we typically feature music, comedy, storytelling, small-scale theater, live shows, open mics, and artist talks. We also have 3 galleries where we feature the work of regional artists, and we have gallery receptions and all kinds of things like that. We are remote for the remainder of the season, which our season goes until June, although we are working on some summer events, including a movie series, an outdoor movie series this summer. So if you're interested in any of the events that we have going on there, I really, really recommend you taking a look at our website. It's at ātac160.org. I'll put it in the chat. We have some open submissions going on, and just in general, I'd love for you to see what we have to offer. Tonight, what are we doing? Well, you're here for Process. This is a series that we have been running since September, where we feature artists who talk to us about some part of their process that's interesting to them, whether that's a body of work that they've worked on or some very specific niche thing that they want to share with you about how they work. This is my personal favorite of many of the programs that we have started since the pandemic, and it will continue. If there are any artists in the house, and I can clearly see that there are, and you would like to be a part of this program, please reach out to us. We feature visual artists, writers, performers, musicians, everything. So if you or you know somebody that might like to present, I really recommend it. It is a sweet little program. So how it works is Yve Holtzclaw is going to give us a presentation, which you will enjoy. And then if you have questions or comments or feedback or encouragement, you will have the opportunity to share those things after the talk. If you feel shy or just like confused about your mute button, whatever it is, you can relay your comments in the chat, and I will make sure that they make it to ears. That is also true for those of you who are out there in Facebook. I will be monitoring the Facebook chat, so if I look down and on my phone, not bored, just making sure those people are included. And if you have any questions out there, you can leave them in the Facebook chat and I'll relay them into this space. I think that that's all the information I need to give you. And so I'm going to hand it over to Yve Holtzclaw, who's a multidisciplinary artist and is working with us tonight on this event, but is also presenting with us a virtual visual event, which I hope that she'll speak to. And then just one additional thing, if you go onto our website and you can see our virtual venue, I'll put the link in the chat for this as well. Any donations that are made tonight for this show, we're going to pass them all over to organizations helping the most recent violence in Atlanta. And maybe Yve can speak a little bit more about that, but ātac is going to be, at the urging of Yve, is going to pass any generosity you have for us along to that community that needs it more right now. With that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Yve, and thank you so much for being here.
Okay, thank you so much, Janelle. Hi, oh my goodness, faces. I love to see you. Wow. Hello. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen and start saying words, and then we will go from there. So, yay. Okay, so my name's Eve. I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I mostly work on large scale installations, and I focus a lot on ceramics and fibers and, oh, wow, how do I scroll? Okay. Um, and creating kind of immersive installations using whatever materials I can get my hands on. I'm pretty lowbrow when it comes to what I will use and what I won't use. My work tends to focus a lot on grief and loss and the way that we memorialize the things that we care about in our lives. So I think about that a lot, and it's not to be too somber. It's more about kind of cherishing the things that we have as important when we have them, and then how we remember them once they're gone. So today I'm gonna talk a little bit specifically about drawing and the way that I access drawing in my practice. I'm not really going to be talking about, the formal ways of rendering or how to draw, but really I'm going to be focusing on how I use drawing to understand the world around me and the way that that really shows itself in the work that I make. So this is kind of what my sketchbook looks like in general. It's usually quite dense. I love to draw. I love to fill the space as best I can. And I like to really just have fun with it. It's not something that I stress about too much. In fact, it's the way that I try to de-stress. I really try and let my sketchbook be a place that my thoughts can flow pretty organically, and I can reinterpret my experiences so that they make more sense to me when I look back on them in the future. So I do that in a few ways. One of them is I really try and look at the world around me and draw things that I see. And I try and not do that too didactically. I try not to be too specific about what I'm seeing and how it comes out. I try to draw the thing that's in front of me and then roll with it. So one of the things I do is I usually draw in ink. I try not to go back too much. When I make a line, I try and live with it. It's like a friend, you forgive it and then you go on. So what that usually means is I often situate my drawings in something that's real. So I look around in my life or in my world and I draw something that's real, and then I imagine the things around it so that it makes more sense to me in context. So an example of this is going to a museum with my parents about a year ago. I love to draw just everything, and I try and fit as much on a page as I can. And something that I find really fulfilling is the way that the drawings interact with each other once they're all on the page. They tell a new story. It goes from being about one thing in particular and instead is about the relationships that they form with one another. So I really like this one in particular. This is a drawing of a painting that we saw at a museum with the Sloss back in the background, which is an iron processing facility, and then me in the front with my cat. I feel like there's something about taking all the different parts of something and laying them out so that they can form a new connection that I find to be really meaningful. I feel like this captures the way I felt about the day, or the way I experienced the day, or the way I can look back on it in a way that's more precise than words can explain, or a way that's more precise than just a photo could really get. So another thing I do is I like to draw myself. I think that putting people in places is good, and the person who I feel most comfortable putting in funny places is myself. I really like drawing myself, especially because I don't really ever use photo references. I like to imagine the way that I look, very, very based off of the way that I feel, rather than, the technicality of my face. I think that's just so tedious after a while. So there's me with like trash opossums, me bending over backwards, and me being very, very strong. And the thing that's most important to me about this is that it really helps for me to contextualize how I feel being in my body and the way that I feel about the world around me. Because I think often it's really hard to tell exactly what you're feeling until you're past it. And then once you're past it, you're not feeling it anymore. So I think it's a really useful kind of journal device to draw myself and the way that I interact with the world around me. So for example, this is a drawing that I made of me and Sam, and I drew it while I was sitting there. Like, this is not off of a photo. It was just kind of like, I felt kind of derpy, you know, like it'd been a long day and we were just hanging out in one of my friend's rooms, and we all lived together in that big house. And I feel like that's pretty representative of the way that I approach drawing, is I imagine the place that I'm at rather than trying to actually draw it, which is a weird distinction. So I really like what that does for my sketchbook. And overall, I like the way that different things kind of bump into each other and the way that they intersect. And I like being able to look through it. I can look back and really see the way that I was feeling and understand it, which has been kind of helpful in our current situation. And I feel like it's kind of poetic, you know, you take a little bit of something here and a little bit of something there, and then when you put it together, it forms a new thing. That's something that Virginia Woolf writes about a lot that I think is really wonderful, and I try and think about, which is this idea of picking up things that are true rather than things that are factual. So we're taking the facts of a situation to find a deeper truth that resonates with more people. So when I'm working in my sketchbook or when I'm making drawings, I try and pick up one or two true things that happen, two facts. And then when I combine them with, you know, my emotions and my experience and the things that I saw that day, I think that it kind of hints at what I'm really trying to get at when I'm making work. So I'm just very excited to be able to show everyone my sketchbook, because this is something I just shove at my friends all the time. So this is a day that I spent with Celia that I thought was just a wonderful day. And you can see the buildings are celebrating in the top corner. It was really wonderful. I was ignoring the news that day, which was also very good. And these are just kind of the things that happened. And I think that this kind of gets at how I feel. And I really, really like doing it. And I've started to be pretty specific about the words as well. Like, I've started writing down what people say. Something that one of my friends mentioned that I find to be very helpful is to write down my thoughts like I'm having a conversation with somebody rather than like they're just my thoughts. And I think that really helps me to be clear, to create two characters and have them have a conversation. Wow. So these are things that I really enjoy in my sketchbook, and I try to bring out from my sketchbook into my sculptures. So because my sketchbook can be quite personal, I'm not usually quite ready to show it until a year or so after I'm done with it, because I don't know what to say about it, if I'm being honest, you know, when you're still in it. So I started last year creating small sculptures based I'm so sorry, based directly off of sketches I made in my sketchbook. And I'm really interested in kind of the contrast between those things. So this is a drawing, and then this would be the sculpture. So it's kind of like coloring in the drawing, but it exists in space and you don't have to shade anything. Who knew? Just wonderful. When it exists in real life, like it exists. I think that's wonderful. So here's another one. I took the three figures on the right side and I put them on a little carpet so they would not fall over, and made them into a little sculpture. And I just think it's really interesting the things that change when you take something from being flat into being 3D. And I think it starts to kind of speak to that multiplicity I'm really interested in, when you can take something that you understand really precisely, and then you take it and you flatten it out into a drawing, and then you take that drawing and you're no longer really thinking directly about that experience anymore, and then you can make it into something that is that third thing. It's this thing that's true. It's this thing that is more about my practice, or more about this undercurrent I'm following in my work. So that's kind of the thread of my sketchbook, and that has been the thing that I've been trying to think about while I'm working on my current project. So I'm working on this really large quarantine quilt. I wanted to take you really quickly through to how I kind of got to where I am right now. So, oops. So I am working on a body of work that's going to be installed at ātac in April, and you should stay tuned because I'm very excited. But that's kind of consisted of a series of paintings and sculptures that intersect, and I've been trying to examine my own experience of quarantine. I think a lot about loss, and I think a lot about how we process things when they're difficult. And so for me, this has been a process of trying to memorialize the things that I think are important that I might want to look back on and really reflect on. It's called Evidence of My Nest, and that's from a Rebecca Sugar quote where she was talking about if there was only one thing that you could leave for the next generation of like beings, not even humans, just the next species that takes over intelligent life, what would that one sentence be, or what would that one thing be that you could leave for them? And she said just evidence of her nest, just evidence that she existed and evidence of how much she loved the things in her life. And I thought that was just so beautiful, especially in the context of what's going on right now. I think that it's really hard to think about the things that we find to be important and wonderful and special. So I've been trying to really reflect on how much I love seeing the houses on the hill, or how much I love seeing my dog be happy, like very normal things. And a lot of these kind of like tender feelings of just being in bed and drinking coffee. And I think we've been really taking the good with the bad this past year. It's not been all of one. It's kind of been a nice mix, I think. It's just tougher than normal. And then I broke my foot and I got very sick of just seeing myself all the time in the work I was making. That got very tiring. So I have an idea for the installation is going to be essentially an interior space and an exterior space, and I needed there to be a dividing wall. And I was trying to figure out what to do with that wall and how to form it. And I kind of went back to just drawing. I was like, what am I missing right now in my life and my art? And I was like, I miss the people I care about. Like, that's really it. Like, I just miss my friends. I miss being around people. And I want to be able to incorporate them into what I'm doing. So I reached out on Instagram for people to send me pictures of what they've been up to. I think I asked specifically for like animals and beds and cuddles and like whatever you got. And I got a lot of people reached out, and it was really, really cathartic. Like, it was just wonderful. Like, people sent me these like just very sweet, tender pictures of them with the people they cared about. And then I got to sit here and every night paint 5 or 6 different little portraits of people with their animals and their homes and their places. And I kind of tried to do that thing that I'm doing with my sketchbook, where I'm taking I'm trying to put myself where they are. I'm not trying to make a painting of the picture they sent me. I'm trying to take the picture they sent me and imagine what it would be like to be there and empathize with the feelings that they're feeling or the things that I'm perceiving and what they've sent over. And I want to make that into something that I can work with. I think that whenever I see a photograph, I often get caught up in the details of it. It can be very difficult for me to parse out what's important and what's not. And so by sitting down every night and working on these watercolor paintings, I was able to make something that had kind of this like, it's parsed down, it's got just kind of the figure that I'm interested in. They're all kind of a consistent size. It's gotten very blocky, and I know who's in it and how they're feeling. And that's really what I'm interested in. And also, people just sent me the nicest things, and it was very, very sweet. I can't explain how just meaningful and beautiful it was to be able to do this. Okay, more animals and dogs. It's good. So this isn't all of them, but I've just kind of been like hanging them up in different places in my house, trying to figure out what to do with them. Like, I'm like, I love these things, but they're all so different. I don't really know how to put them together. And something that I noticed that I was really drawn to in them is that kind of blockiness of each of the pieces that I was really drawn to. I had a really clear sense of where each person was in terms of their space. I had a really clear sense of like the texture and the emotion and all those things that I was looking for. And I knew I wanted to incorporate fabric into the installation. So I had this conversation with one of my friends, and she told me that her mother had sent her a quilt and told her that she was sending her a big hug, so that then whenever she's under that quilt, she can just think about it being a big hug. And I was like, oh, like that really hit me. And so I decided that sewing is going to be the most practical way to do this. And then that somehow alleviated my anxiety about having no technical prowess at sewing. I was like, if it's just like a drawing, but like the pen is like a sewing machine, then we can do this, right? So what I've done is then I took all of the pieces and then I scanned them all in. And I love that it's my computer, so I could just show you things. And I combined them into this document. So I could really go through and figure out how big everything needed to be. Oops. And so I have this document, and then I took all of the watercolors and then I put them in here. And then this document is the length and height in inches that the quilt will be in feet. So that took away some of the anxiety I had. And now what I can do is I can go in, and if I know the face needs to be this big, in this document, it's just over 1 inch big. So when I'm making it in the quilt, I can look at it and know that it needs to be just over 1 foot big when I'm working on it. And I also kind of like the chunkiness of digital drawing. So I was kind of like scrolling on here with my mouse and leaving some space to really like play with the fabric once I got it. So that is kind of how that happened. I'm really excited about this document, by the way. I don't know if you can tell. This has been one of my favorite things. Okay, so I made that document, and then I made, of course, a test with my face, because I actually, when I say I don't really know anything about sewing, I like really don't actually know anything about sewing. I keep hashtagging this a quilt, and I was so afraid fibers people are gonna be like, that's not a quilt. Like, I don't know what the hell you're doing. This is gonna fall apart in a year. But I think there's something kind of fun about that, where I can move forward with my own mind. Okay, so when I started working, I just really loved the effects I was getting. It was exactly what I was kind of looking for in the watercolor. I was kind of get that chunkiness of the lines. I was able to kind of translate this thing that went from being, you know, a picture to a drawing to a digital drawing to something that is now made out of fabric and is quite large, which I love. Oh my gosh, it's so much faster and more consistent than painting. I did not know that this was going to be so much fun. And there's kind of penny for scale. So I make the figures, and then I'm making the backgrounds, and then I'm putting it all together in my 600 square foot apartment. So that means that I do not have a picture of everything put together. There will be a picture of everything put together in the future when it is installed. But what I can show you is some details, and in this moment, also very proud of this, montage of me working. Oops. So I don't know, I just kind of got really into it. I liked the fact I could take videos of everything. I really have, and you can kind of get a better sense for the scale here, seeing it, I think, in motion and working on it. And I also have been trying to follow this principle that I've been thinking about of drawing everything 3 times. Where I draw it and then I kind of outline it in something, and then some of that is resolved by the fabric in a way that was really surprising. Another thing that I really, really liked about working this way, which this is a new process for me, so I really am just pretending like it's painting, but I know it's not, is the way that I can take the pieces of fabric and lay them down like it's a painting. And then I don't really have to think about what a face looks like anymore. I can just like think about how I'm going to attach everything so it doesn't fall apart like after I shake it. So that resolves a lot of the issues that I have, like in terms of like, oh, would it be more artistic if I made a paintbrush that went this way? But instead I'm like, it's like a pair of sneakers, you know, like it has to go together a certain way. And I think that part of the process is
Oh.
evident in that. And I really, really like it. I've started enjoying kind of these lines that go across the faces and across the glasses and kind of make these nice little like puckering on the sides. So that's kind of the process that I've gone through to get to this point in the quilt. It's quite, it's not even tedious. I don't wish it was tedious. I'm glad it's not tedious. But I've made it large enough that I feel very satisfied at the end of every day's work. So like this is like a large section that is going to end up being the blanket in the middle. And that's also kind of fun. Whenever those large blobs on the sketch, I've been turning those into little landscapes or little houses or things that I see on my walk. So it's turned into kind of another form of sketchbook journaling device that I've really enjoyed. Okay, so the last thing I want to touch on before I wrap up is the thing that I realized that I was missing in the installation that I really liked about my sketchbook, because I realized my life is just trying to make my art more like my sketchbook, is the narrative quality, like the very explicitly narrative quality of having comics in my sketchbook. So I've created a zine, and I just wanted to share a really quick little peek at the process for making that. So I just really hastily went through my sketchbook and found all the possible comics that I had made, which was surprising because if you'd asked me before I looked through, I would have said 3. And after I looked through, there was closer to 30. And that made me feel like I was expressing myself. So I took them, I scanned them in, I put them in Photoshop, I made them more readable so that they're all consistently formatted. And then this is another couple. I kind of like the way that they look by just going around and cutting out the forms and putting them into a new little bit. And then I went through and redrew them using a light box. So I printed off this Photoshop version using my printer, and I used a light box to make all of these, which is just redrawing. I've never had drawings that look so clean. All my sketchbook drawings tend to be quite all over the place. And so that will also be available. This is kind of the more explicit and like, not explicit, the more like personal and it's very clear. I can be quite abstract with the rest of the things I make. I like the way that things kind of like randomly link together, but it's a series of 16 little comics that I've made during quarantine. So I'll leave you with the last one, which is probably my favorite, which is Sam and Liz on Wednesday hanging out, which is a regular occurrence. And I drew one day and I just find this very charming. I think we've all had a lot of outdoor picnics with people we care about. And the zine is not meant to be like, I'm so sad in my house. It's really about kind of how complex this experience is. So that is all I have to say. That's my presentation. Thank you guys for listening. If there are any questions, I would love to answer them. And also thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Okay, I stopped sharing my screen. This is the thing I do now. I stop sharing my screen. Stop. Ah, hello.
Oh.
Thank you so much. I am even more excited for this installation than I already was. Really, really excited to host you. We haven't been able to do any visual arts work really for the pandemic, so we are really, really thrilled. So I'm going to encourage anybody that has a question to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it into the space. And if you feel uncomfortable for any reason, you can type it out and I'll say it for you.
Okay.
Hi, Ethan. How are you doing? You're so sweet. Um, but yeah, it's gonna be up in April, and it will be more. It'll be. I I have big plans for how it will be documented. The which has been also kind of a fun thing about thinking about it.
I have a question. I'm going to start it off. And people, please jump in because I can talk a lot. So, a question or a thought I had looking at your the various translations from photo to your drawings to your sculptural style to these fabric pieces, which, you know, it's interesting that you were very clear that that's a new experience for you, because your style is so clearly translated into all of these mediums. And I just wondered about that. Do you personally, are you just very, very comfortable in the visual representation of like your particular style and your creativity? Did you have to work with the fabric to make them relay that, just that style? Like, I was just really struck by how clearly of your work it is.
I understand what you mean. I think that it is something that I've really loved collaging. Like, it's something that I've always liked doing. You know, cutting things up and putting them back together. It's not, and it's also not that I've never worked with fabric. I've worked a lot with like paper mache and like fibers techniques before. So it's not totally unfamiliar. So I think that also helps. But I think I have also been surprised by how much it looks the way I want it to look, because very rarely do I start with a plan and finish with that same plan. So I think I've tried specifically in this project to know what I'm looking for from the materials. So when I go, like, I'm thrifting all the fabric. So I go to the thrift store and I go and I look for specific colors, and I have to go, you know, every week because they don't always have what I need.
Love it.
And so that way I have a lot of control over the process. So I think I have a clear idea of what I'm looking for. And I think that that has helped a lot. And I also think the scale helps. Like, if I was working smaller, I don't think it would translate as well. I think it's a very like human body scale, and that's a scale I'm very comfortable with. And if it was any smaller, it would probably look a lot more awkward, because I'm not really trying to compensate for anything. I'm like, this is gonna be big, ha. So I don't worry too much about the details. That might answer your question. If there's more specifics, I can try.
Oh, that does. It's just so it's nice to see something that's it's just such a clear translation. We have a question from April. Do you still need pictures of people in their masks?
I will take any pictures of people with their masks. I'm thinking some of the spaces that are just color are gonna have kind of actual, like, I've now learned more about quilting in the past like few weeks. Now I decided to, you know, do Googling rather than just being like, I'm doing whatever. So I thought it might be kind of fun to make some patches of people to fill in some of the spaces. And I also realized that like it's pretty tone deaf to like make the quilt that I've made without having any pictures of people in masks in it. So I did ask specifically for like those. If you have them, you should send them over. In the next, probably this weekend, I'm gonna try and paint everyone who sends something in. And then I'll pull, kind of the same way I did with the earlier watercolors, I'll pull the few that I feel like I can really work with and then incorporate them into the larger quilt. So yes, send me pictures of your face. Let me steal your face. I love to steal faces. Yes.
Kat asks, will you be including text in your quilt like you do in your journals?
I have thought about it often. I have not yet figured out a way to do it in a way that doesn't feel awful. Like when I like there to be text, I like there to be a lot of text. Like I would like for it to be like a block of text. And I don't really have the patience, the machinery, or the space right now, I think, to like really do that level of embroidery. But that's definitely something I'm thinking about. And that's kind of why I did the zines, to resolve that, because I would like for there to be some clear-cut words. But you know, I would like to, but not in this project is probably the answer. Making a illustrated short story. Yes. So the funny, would you ever consider making an illustrated short story similar to your zines? The other like pre-part of this whole thing is that I was originally going to be doing this installation based around a road trip that my partner and I are going to take. We're working on a short story together about a cowboy in the desert, an opossum desert. It's pretty fantastic. It's very whimsical. They like herd opossums in the desert, and it's in this like apocalypse landscape, but it's also very like we're going on an adventure kind of vibes. So I'm working on that, but it's something that needs to be informed by being more familiar with desert landscapes, which I'm not. So we're gonna do that next year. My foot injury meant that I couldn't go on the road trip when I had hoped to. So, and then I'd also just made all this work about quarantine. I was like, am I gonna like bang my head against the wall and pretend like I'm not thinking about this? Or am I gonna actually adapt the plan so that it's about the work that I'm interested in right now? So yes, we're gonna be making a series of short stories, and that's what they're about. But that's probably gonna be in like a year. Do I plan on including the sculptures in the show, or is it going to be quilt? Yes, so the sculptures are going to be part of the show. So I talked about the quilt because I feel like it's the part that translates the most directly from my sketchbook practice. And I just really wanted to talk about drawing because I never get to show anyone my sketchbook. The exterior of the space that I'm creating is going to be the quilt, and then you can go inside of it. And then the way I'm working on the sculptures is that they are going to have 3 viewpoints. So I was really interested in the fact that like the light just changes around us every day, and like that's it, you know, like so each of the sculptures is going to be on the inside of the quilt, and when you stand from different perspectives, it'll be different times of day. So there'll be one at night, one in the morning, and then one kind of in the evening with different backdrops behind them. So those will be more like almost solid colors behind them, and then they'll have the different coloring on the side of the sculpture. This is hard to articulate. That's why I'm making the sculptures. But yes, the sculptures are still going to be part of it, but they're like in the little interior space of it. Yeah. I kind of like the idea that like you kind of go into a hovel of all of us like quilted together in this like nice camaraderie, and then you're in this kind of meditative space, which is also really fun to think about, making an installation that's supposed to be experienced and then you're documenting. So that's been another layer of this whole thing. It's hard to divorce myself from thinking about what it's like to be there.
I have a question to bring in from email, which is, what part of your process do you find the most delightful?
Oh, I love the word delightful. The sewing has become, I feel about the sewing machine the same way I felt about the wheel when I first started throwing. Like there's something just so like powerful about it, where I'm just like amazed at how quickly these things become one thing. You know, like at first it was just all these scraps, and then now it's this thing that's very real and I can shake it around and like nothing's gonna move. which maybe isn't very novel, but working in ceramics for 4 years when everything takes, 3 weeks minimum from start to finish, like it's quite fulfilling to kind of like pummel away at some fabric and then have it be something real at the end of the day and not have to like move it, like I can fold it up at the end of the day. Oh my God. I was going to try and do all this in wood at the beginning. I couldn't. So yeah, I would say just using the sewing machine. I really like using the sewing machine. It is super fun. I can just watch Criminal Minds and like make things all day. It's truly delightful. Sewn 3D fabric forms. Okay, so I love presenting things like I thought about it and then it was perfect. There was a long period of time where I was trying to figure out how to make these freaking things stand up, and I decided that it had to be in the round. Like if I'm gonna make all these figures, they need to be in the round. They can't just be, they can't be flat. I don't know why I was so like upset with that. I think it's like a hangover from being a sculpture person. Like it needs to be round. I do not have the technical prowess at this moment to make something that is going to be able to stand up and be made out of fabric. I tried all sorts of like stiffeners and like stuffing, and everything just fell over in a really unfulfilling and uninspiring way. So I would like to. I'm considering it. I had this idea that if you just dipped fabric in glue, then it would stand up on its own, which is maybe, no, that's probably just ridiculous. That's definitely not a reasonable thing to think. It is not just paper. Fishing line, yes. If there was a hanging grid, then I would be approaching this differently. But the idea is everything needs to be supported from the bottom up. So I have kind of worked from that. So the whole structure is going to be kind of supported by a PVC pipe structure underneath it. So it'll be able to hang. So there'll be a front and a back to the quilt. So the colorful part that's on the inside with the sculptures is going to be on the inside, and then the outside is the quilted portion. So chicken wire also is a good idea. I am also so broke and I have so little space. The other reality is that everything needs to be able to fold up and fit in my car, and be able to make it to Framingham, which I've thought through. For a second there, I was like, I'll figure it out. And I figured it out by not doing something stupid and irrational. Yeah, so yes, if I had like an extra year, I think I would do like this, everything would be a sculpture and the backdrop. And yeah.
I wanted to say something about your prowess with the sewing machine. I think it's funny that you were talking about Googling later sort of how to more formally go about quilting, but I really think it's so, I think it's really brilliant how you're quilting right now, because I imagine that the quilt wouldn't look the way it does, the style that you have while you're quilting as you are right now would look completely different if you had some sort of like training in the sort of formal craft of it, you know what I mean? And I think it's really spontaneous and also that way inventive in a way that, how many people would think just, okay, I'm going to cut like a square and then I'm just going to sew a single line through the square. Because I would think immediately, okay, I have to close the shape. That's how you quilt, right? It's closed shapes that are all neatly, but you're like, no, I'm just doing it.
I'm
and
really slapping it on there. Yeah, I appreciate that that's the feedback, because like when I first posted that, I posted some of these on the internet and I was like, oh dear God, like they're gonna come in from the bleachers and yell at me for like the way that I'm quilting. Like I don't know the right way to do it, but I know this isn't it. Like that's all I know right now. And that has not been the response, which has been, I think, really nice. But I'm glad that it reads that way, that it reads as kind of a spontaneous thing, because it is. Like it'll fit together in the end, like, you know.
Yeah, but I think it's good. I think that's totally a strength of the work. So
Yeah.
that's not a question. I just
Yes.
wanted to say it, and yeah.
Thank you. It makes my heart warm. I appreciate it.
Amen.
I just wanted to jump in on that, on what Izzy said there, because I actually just recently started working at an elementary school, and I've had the privilege to work with kindergartners during art classes.
Oh,
And there's something that's so, I mean, you can't, there was one drawing that you showed where you're stretching, and you're in the grass and there are houses in the background.
Yeah.
And in the grass and the flowers in the grass, and there was something about that drawing that it's like elementary, not in like the elementary school way, but like it's pared down in a way that people forget how to pare their artwork down in that way. That's like, it's rudimentary and a really beautiful way. And I think that you like what Izzy was saying about those beautiful quilts you've been working on. That's the qualities that they convey, is just like really raw, like yearning just to create without like worrying about any judgmental qualities to like what you're making. You're just creating and expressing. And I that's how I read them too. It's like they're so like in motion, and they're almost like could be still being made as we're seeing them. And I just think that's really fresh and wonderful as well.
I appreciate that. I do have to say, like, I think working with children is the most fulfilling thing that happens in my life. I haven't been able to work with kids since I hurt my foot. And like, I just think about it all the time. Like I love to watch them just slap stuff together. Like they don't know, like they don't care. Like if it breaks later, they don't care. And it's something that Chuck actually talked about in our drawing class that I hold on to, is that a kid will make a drawing and it'll be done, you know, and then you ask them to tell a story about that drawing, and they will tell a different story depending on their mood, or depending on the day, or depending on what they do. And that's just so cool because they still believe the story every time and it's still the same drawing. And I think that that's something I keep in mind when I work. I really love the way that kids work. And I think there's something really delightful, I love that word, delightful about it. Thank you for pointing that out, Ed. You should send me pictures of the things your kids make.
I will. I've been taking a lot, so
I'm like starving. I'm so
no problem.
Drive. Oh, Celia says such nice words. What gives you the drive, focus, and perseverance to make stuff every day? I have a character. This isn't the answer. I have a character who I draw sometimes that her name is Perseverance, because I think that that's a much better way to say that word. It's one of my favorite drawings. And she's got this big hair and she's like, Perseverance. But the answer is that I can't do anything else. And the other answer, I mean, like, I love it. Like, I love working, but I also have like a very unique position right now where I am injured and I am recovering, and all I can do all day is sit in the apartment essentially and walk my dog sometimes when my foot doesn't hurt too much. So it has really been cathartic and wonderful to be able to wake up every day and make something. I think it gets me out of my head. It gets me out of this apartment in some ways. So it's something that I've always enjoyed because it makes me feel like big and strong to be able to work every day. You know, like I like to do that. I think it helps me to pat myself on the back at the end of the week to know that I've done something and that I'm working. But right now it's definitely a matter of sanity. I looked at the quilt and I was like, oh, this is going to be a lot of work. And I was like, this is going to be a lot of work. Like, that's great. This is wonderful. I love that. That's what I'm going to do for the next few weeks. Like, I can definitely do that. So, you know, and I think also just getting in the habit of working every day. If you wake up and you're like, I don't want to work. Then you work, you feel better. And then at the end of the day, you've done something. So I think my hardest part of the process is actually the part where I'm planning things and I can't look back on my day and be like, I've made something. That's really tough. Like when I feel like I'm kind of hitting a wall, or I feel like I haven't done anything productive, that's probably the harder days to make it through. Because I think that you've done something, when you've written something or responded to emails, but it doesn't feel that way. So right now I'm kind of in this great space where I can be like, I'm so productive. I sewed together like 14 feet of things and I can look at it and hold it and hug it and put it over my shoulders and run around like Superman. So I think that sort of answers your question.
Wow.
And also the houses around here are so nice. It's hard to not go on a walk and come back and want to make something. It's really a very cute neighborhood. So what thought processes do you go through when you're abstracting or building upon a drawing from observation, like the one I did from the painting at the museum? That one's a hard one to put my finger on. I think that the thing I said at the beginning, where working in ink has been really helpful, and even working in the watercolor has been really helpful, because there's something where there can be no mistakes. So when I put down a mark, it has to live there and I have to be happy with it, because if I decide I hate it, then there's nothing to be done. I think that something I've really enjoyed in trying to pare down my style and like abstract forms is when I make a mistake, I try and do it again. So when I'm making a building and I mess it up somehow, or I put a line where it shouldn't be, then that becomes a texture, or that becomes a shading. That becomes some part of it that I didn't originally plan, but I incorporate because I have to, like it happened, and I can either hate my drawing or I cannot hate my drawing. And I think by liking my drawing, that helps me to continue to make drawings that look the same, because I do begin to, in the end, like them. So I think that's more of a mental process rather than like a technical answer to your question. And building on drawing from observation, I think that that's more accidental. I actually tend to make a drawing and it bumps into another drawing and I go, whoops, and I draw over it. But I kind of like for those pages to look like a mess. Amy, hi. Can you describe the feeling of knowing when you think something is done? It's so much easier when it's fabric and not ceramic. I think that in some ways, I think I really was stoked about the fact I could put something in the kiln 20 times and get it out, and then so nothing was ever done. I still feel like that way about a lot of ceramic pieces. I just want to keep piling things on. But there's something about the quilting where I can tell when it starts to look like the drawing, then I know that that's the amount of detail I needed to add. And that's also the nice thing about the quilting, which is that I know the level of detail I'm going for because I have the plan I'm working off of, but also like there's sometimes where I just look at it when it's done and I'm like, I hate that. Like, there's just something about the pants that just, like it's like that feeling you can't really describe or you hate it. And then if I just add shading, it helps. And then once I've added the shading, I can feel the difference between that previous emotion and the emotion I'm feeling now, and I know to leave it alone. I think also having a timeline and having a schedule of things I need to do every day helps me to be like, and I did it. It's there. I need to make some choices, and I made them. And it's the same thing as kind of Celia's question, where it was like, I have no other choice but to like this. So if I don't like it, maybe there's a part of it that I feel is undone, that I feel like I'm not super satisfied with. And I need to put something of that quality on the next part I work with so that they complement one another. what's the joke about your eyebrows? Like that they're sisters, not twins. Like I think that's kind of the way that I like to think about my drawings at work. Like they're not all the same and they're not all going to be perfect, but they all like help each other out in the end and balance each other.
Sisters are not twins.
Celia. Oh yeah, because you just kept doing things and it was so annoying. Like you kept being like, what else do I need to do to this sculpture? And I was like, stop, it's perfect. And I think that's also really helpful, is to have Celia, who's a very like perfectionist person, and I see her work and I go, oh, that's so good. And she goes, no, it's awful. And then I go, oh, other people probably think that things that are this done are good. So I can probably get away with that, and Celia will never let herself get away with that. So I think that's kind of helpful. Have I ever made any work with clay and fabric together? Yes. Thank you, Amy. Yes, I have. Yeah, that picture I showed at the very beginning of the clay masks on the paper mache thing, I guess that's the closest to fabric, though. Like I did sew large fabric backdrops for that installation. But in terms of like, I've always romanticized the idea of like Mod Podging like clay with fabric, so it had that texture, like a collage. Like I've always thought that would be really cool. Oh yeah, and that's true. Yay! I love that people remember things. Thanks, Mom. Yeah, and also I did a installation with a bunch of vases, and they were all kind of like tipsy topsy-turvy, and it was about a woman with very long red hair. So I incorporated some fabric that kind of wound around it and also went under the parts of the vase so they were more stable. So I haven't really done a lot formally with like weaving or like really applying fabric onto clay. But I usually like to have some sort of fibers element. I think it really balances out the clay in a really beautiful way. Like you can get a lot of movement in clay, but then there's kind of a very definitiveness to it. Like it starts and it stops, and you kind of know where that happens. But with fibers, it's so much more rambling. And there's sometimes a rambling quality I want things to have. And so then I usually use fibers processes to do that. So that kind of, I think that's the extent that I worked with it. It tends to kind of be like the part that comes in later, if that makes sense. Like I build the bones with the clay, and then I fill in the color with the fabric. It really resolves the kind of background issues without it being on a piece of wood, because when it's on a piece of wood, it looks so flat. And also it's heavy and expensive. And sheets are cheap. Did you know sheets only cost $1.99 at Goodwill? You have to go some like specific days sometimes, but like I did the math. That's what we should do. Okay, cool. Cool.
All right. I'm going to use this tone of voice, which always brings in the rest of the questions, where I say, thank you. If anybody has any additional questions, and if anybody's out there on Facebook and wants to throw in a question in the chat, I'm still watching, I'm still paying attention. And so I can add them in. Thank you so much for this talk and your presentation. And thank you everybody for participating so much. It is always the highlight of my week of processes. So thank you. This was so great. I think that probably everybody is extra excited to see this installation when it's up. And so stay tuned. Oh, who are your favorite artists right now?
I have an answer, and I am so terrified. It's deep in my Instagram. So I've been trying to look at Fibers people. Oh my God, they've been sending me. Yeah, that's true. Celia is my favorite artist. The Fibers people have just been sending me like artists who do things like what I'm doing, which I just had an impossible task of finding before I started doing it. Like I would say what I was going to do and people were just like, okay. And now that I'm doing it, I'm actually getting recommendations. But allow me to see if I can pull it up. There's one artist in particular. Ooh, my high school art teacher texted me out of the blue and sent over Lisa Butler, who I did not know until recently, but she makes just like the most phenomenal portraits, like quilted portraits, and you should check out her work. But they're all just wonderful. And she's not doing exactly what I'm doing. Hers is very tight and she uses a lot of like textures and a lot of different textiles. But yeah, so that's someone who I've been thinking about a lot. Yeah, and Kevin Snipes for some reason. I think Kevin Snipes is always on the mind. I think I can't go anywhere without thinking about Kevin Snipes. Okay, thank you, Celia.
Awesome, thank you for that. If anybody has any questions that they think of after we end this session tonight, where can people find you?
I am on Instagram at yves.ceramics and an ironic twist of fate. And also I have a website that has my email. It's all Yve Holtzclaw, so like yveholtzclaw.com, yveholtzclaw@gmail.com. And yeah, Yves.ceramics is pretty much where I keep things up. I also have a Facebook page, but we'll try and keep that one. I'm gonna put more stuff on it, and then you can go follow it. So that's where you can find me.
Nice. And aside from that, everybody should stay tuned, check out the website, and so you can see details about the upcoming installation with virtual tours, which will be live. And so we'll have live and recorded documentation of this event. So please register and sign up for those things. This was so lovely. Thank you so much for being here and for joining and gathering in space in this weird time. Yves, thank you so much for this. It was great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all. It's so good to see everyone's faces. I just overflowing. I love you all. Please have a good night. Take care. It's good to see you.